The whole council was on its feet, and the king had not said one word. I stood at the centre of a chamber full of the most powerful wolves in the north, in my flour-dusted apron, and none of them were looking at me. They were looking at the small hand gripping mine, the king's son, 3 years old, his fingers wound so tightly through my fingers that his knuckles had gone white. Refusing, with the whole force of a pup's stubborn certainty, to let go. And I understood, standing there, that if I opened my hand they would take him. That the moment I stopped holding on was the moment they had been waiting for. That a woman who was nothing, who had walked into this world 11 days ago with a basket of bread, was somehow the only thing standing between this child and the people who wanted to raise him into a weapon. I did not let go. But that is the middle of it, and a woman who tells you the middle before she has earned it deserves to be turned off. Let me go back to an ordinary market morning, with a loaf of bread and a child I had never seen before in my life. I sold bread. That was the whole of me, as far as the world was concerned, and I had made my peace with the world about it years ago. I was 25, an omega with no pack and no name that opened any doors, and I baked before dawn, and sold in the market square of the lower town, and went home to a single room that smelled, at least, of something good. It is not a large life, but it is mine, and I built it with my own 2 hands out of the raw fact of having nothing, and I have known women with far more who could not say the same. The market was the best hour of my day. The noise, the haggling, the smell of everyone's small commerce all at once, fish and wool and green herbs and my own warm bread. I liked being furniture there. I liked being the woman at the bread stall whom everyone saw and no one noticed, because a person no one notices gets to notice everyone else, and I have always preferred watching to being watched. I was counting coppers into a fishwife's palm when a small hand closed around 2 fingers of my other one. I looked down. A little boy stood at my hip, 3 perhaps, dark-haired, dressed far too finely for the lower market, with the round grave face of a child who has wandered somewhere he was not meant to be and has not yet decided whether to be frightened about it. He was looking up at me with an expression of such total, uncomplicated recognition that for one absurd second I looked behind me to see who he had actually found. There was no one behind me. He was looking at me. And before I could ask him whose he was, or where his people were, or any of the sensible things you ask a lost child, he tightened his grip on my fingers, and he smiled the way only very small children smile, with his whole self, and he said one word. Mama. The market went silent. Not slowly. All at once, the way a room goes silent when something has happened that everyone understands before they have words for it. The fishwife's hand froze over her coppers. The wool seller 2 stalls down stopped mid-sentence. Because in a wolf town, a pup's word carries a weight a human child's never could. A pup's wolf knows blood and bond before the pup can speak, and a pup does not say mama to a stranger. A pup cannot say mama to a stranger, and yet this one had, with the flat certainty of a child, telling you the sky is up. Sweetheart, I said, crouching down, gentle as I could with my heart, doing something strange in my chest. I think you've lost your mother in the crowd. I'm not her. But I'll help you find mama, he said again, patient. The way you repeat yourself to a slow adult. And he climbed into my lap as though it were the most obvious place in the world for him to be, and put his face against my shoulder, and sighed the enormous sigh of a small creature that has finally, after a long search, come home. That was when the guards arrived. They came through the market at a dead run, a wall of the king's own men in iron and grey. Their faces gone the particular white of men who have lost the one thing in the kingdom they cannot afford to lose. They saw the child in my lap, and they stopped as though they had hit a wall, and the biggest of them, I would learn his name, was Edric, the king's second, looked at the pup, and looked at me, and looked at the pup's hand fisted in my apron. And I watched a hardened warrior have no idea what to do. That is the prince, Edric said. His voice came out wrong. That is Bram. The king's son. He swallowed. Whose lap is he in? I don't know, I said honestly. He found me. He won't say his mother's name, he keeps saying. Do not, Edric said. Very fast. Say the word, he said. Not here. Not in front of them. His eyes went to the crowd, which had begun, quietly, to press closer. The king's son does not have a mother. The Luna is 2 years dead. Whatever he called you, Mama, Bram said helpfully, to Edric, and half the market made a sound like a held breath let go. I understood, kneeling in the market square with a dead Luna's son in my arms and a ring of the king's guard around me, that I had opened a door I had not known was there, and that I was not going to be allowed to simply close it and go back to selling bread. They did not arrest me. I half expected it. Instead, Edric crouched down to Bram's level, coaxing, careful, and tried to lift him from my lap, and the pup, who had been gentle as a lamb, came apart. He screamed, he clung. His small wolf, too young to shift, flared under his skin in a way I felt more than saw. A wave of animal grief and terror so raw that every wolf in the market flinched from it. And Bram wound his fingers through mine and would not, could not, be moved. So they did the only thing they could. They brought me to. They brought me to the fortress on the hill in a fine-covered cart that smelled of a life I had never lived, with the prince asleep against my side and his hand still in mine. And I looked out at the grey walls coming up and thought, with the gallows humour that has gotten me through most of my life, that this was a great deal of trouble to go to over a loaf of bread I never even got to sell. The Alpha King was waiting in the yard. I knew him before anyone named him. You would. Magnus of the Iron Territories stood at the top of the steps with the stillness of a man holding himself very carefully upright, and even from the cart I could see that he was beautiful, in the way a cliff is beautiful, grand and cold, and clearly the site of some old disaster, the strongest wolf alive. And when the cart stopped and he saw his son asleep against a strange Omega's shoulder, I watched something cross his face that was not relief, or not only relief. It was fear, naked and quickly hidden, and aimed, impossibly, at me. Bram woke, saw his father, and did a curious thing. He smiled at the king, he loved his father, that was plain, but he did not let go of my hand to go to him. He held on to both of us at once, a small bridge between a grieving king and a bread seller, as though he had decided we belonged on the same side of something and was simply waiting for us to catch up. Your Grace, I said, because someone had to speak, and it was not going to be the king, who was staring at his son's hand in mine like a man looking at a wound. I don't know what's happening. I was selling bread. He found me. I've tried to give him back 3 times, and he won't. I heard my own voice waver and steadied it. I'm no one. I want you to understand that before this goes any further. Whatever your son thinks he knows, he's mistaken. I'm just the woman who was standing there. The king looked at me for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and worn, a step worn down by too many feet. My son's wolf, he said, has never once been wrong. And then he turned and walked inside and left me standing in his yard holding his child, because he could not, I would come to understand, make himself do the one thing everyone expected, take the boy from my arms and send me away. His son's wolf had named me. And a grieving king who has spent 2 years not trusting his own broken instincts was not about to overrule an instinct that had never failed. They gave me a room. Bram would not sleep without me. He sickened when they tried, went pale and would not eat. His little wolf keening through the walls, and so I stayed, the most bewildered guest in the north. A bread seller installed in a fortress because a prince had decided I was his mother, and no one, least of all his father, could talk the child's wolf out of it. The pack had not recovered. That is not an exaggeration. A pup's wolf is never wrong. It is the first thing a wolf child is taught to trust in themselves, and the last thing anyone questions, and the king's own heir had looked at a nameless Omega and named her Mama in the public market, and the whole territory was quietly losing its mind trying to decide what it meant. That the Luna had come back somehow. that I was secretly her blood, that I had bewitched the boy. Every theory but the true one, because the true one had not occurred to a single one of them, myself included. If you want to know what a pup's wolf actually knew that morning, and whether they let a market woman keep standing between that child and the people who came for him, because they did come, then stay with me, follow this one to the end. The whole pack had already decided how this story went. They were wrong about the most important part, and so was I. Lady Sigrun arrived on the third day, and she did not come to threaten me. Clever women rarely do. She was the dead Luna's mother, Astrid's mother, the pup's grandmother by blood, a matriarch of one of the great houses. And she swept into my borrowed room in morning grey she had clearly never taken off and looked at me the way you look at a stain on a thing you loved. "You poor creature," she said, and it was almost kind. "You have no idea what you have walked into. Let me spare you." My daughter was the Luna of these territories, the great love of the king's life, taken from him in childbed, and this pack has grieved her for 2 years. Her voice did not shake, she had practiced it past shaking. My grandson is grasping at a ghost. He sees a soft omega with flower on her hands, and his wolf, poor lamb, reaches for the mother he never knew. It is heartbreaking. It is also a sickness, and you are prolonging it. Every day you stay, you teach that child to fasten his grief onto a stranger who will be gone by winter. She smiled, and the smile was frost. Be kind to him, let him mourn his mother properly. Go, before you break him worse than death already has. She left me with that, and it did exactly what she meant it to. It sat in my chest like a stone, because it was clever, and it was half true, and it was the very fear I had been carrying myself. A ghost. A soft thing for a motherless pup to grasp at. Of course. What else could I possibly be to this child? I resolved, that night, to find a way to gently unwind Bram's small fingers from mine and give him back to his own grief, because I would rather break my own heart than teach a child to break his on me. But my hands had noticed something my fear kept talking me out of, and I have learned, over a hard life, to trust my hands. Because it was not only the pup, it was the king. Magnus could not be in a room with me. Not the way a man avoids a stranger, the way a man avoids a fire he is afraid he will walk into. He came to see his son each evening, and each evening his wolf, that vast grey shadow of him, would drift across the room to where I sat and lie down at my feet with a low sound like something setting down a weight, and Magnus would go rigid, and call it back, and it would not come, and he would leave earlier than he meant to every single time. A grieving man does not flee a bread seller. A man whose own wolf has recognised something his mind refuses to name, that man flees. I filed it away with everything else I was not yet meant to understand, and there was the portrait. The great hall held a painting of the dead Luna, Astrid, golden and lovely, in the place of honour above the high table, where the whole court could not help but see her. Everyone in that fortress looked at it. They bowed to it, some of them. Servants left flowers beneath it. Only one person in the entire pack never looked at it at all, the king. I watched him take his meals with his eyes fixed on his plate, on the fire, on his son, on anything in that hall but the face of the wife he was said to have loved beyond all reason. I had known grief. Grief looks at the beloved face and cannot stop. What Magnus did was the opposite. He could not begin. And those are not the same thing, whatever the whole kingdom had decided to call it. The truth came out on the 9th night, in the hall, after Bram was asleep. I had gone down for bread. Old habit, I could not sleep in a place where I did not make the bread, and found the king alone at the high table with a cup he was not drinking, under the portrait he would not look at. He did not send me away. That was new. I sat, uninvited, which scandalized the one guard at the door, and I asked him the question no one else in that fortress had dared. "You never look at her," I said. "Everyone else in this hall looks at her but you." "Why?" The king was silent for a long time, The fire ticked. When he answered, his voice had lost the worn, smooth armor entirely. Because she deserved to be looked at by a man who loved her, he said, and I was never able to be him. He turned his cup without drinking. You have been told a story. The whole kingdom has. The great love. The Luna taken too soon. The king who mourns her still. It is a kinder story than the one that is true. His jaw worked. Astrid was an alliance, her father's pack for my northern border. We were promised as children. She was clever and she was kind, and she knew, from the first, that I did not feel for her what a mate feels, that the bond had never woken between us, that it never would, because it was not hers to wake. And she married me anyway, and she ran my household better than I ran my kingdom, and she gave me a son, and she died doing it. He finally looked up, and his eyes were terrible. I did not lose the love of my life. I lost a good woman I could never love the way she was owed. And I have spent 2 years unable to look at her face, because it is not grief I feel when I do. It is shame. 3 sentences past any cap I have ever heard of, and I let him have every one of them, because a man does not get to say a thing like that in 3 sentences, and I am not made of rules. And in the space after he said it, the whole shape of everything turned over in my mind at once. And I understood. Magnus, I said slowly, if the bond never woke for her, if it was never hers to wake, I could not finish it. I did not have to. His wolf lifted its great head from my feet and looked at its master. And the king looked at me, and the thing that had been drifting across every room between us for 9 days finally had a name, and it was not a ghost, and it was not grief, and it was not a motherless pup grasping at a soft stranger. A pup's wolf is never wrong. But a pup's wolf does not name the past, it names what is coming. Bram had not looked at me in that market and seen the mother he lost. His small, uncorrupted wolf had looked at me and seen the mother he was going to have, had recognised, with a child's brutal clarity, the mate his father's bond had been saving, unspent, for a woman who sold bread in the lower town. The child had known before any of us. The child had always known. He had simply been waiting, with a pup's endless patience, for the 2 slow adults to catch up. That was the moment the fear went out of me, and something with a spine took its place. Because Lady Sigrun had told me to leave so the child could mourn. And the child was not mourning. The child was right. And I was done, entirely, permanently done, being talked out of a thing my own hands had known for 9 days by people who found the truth less convenient than the story. I'm not a ghost, I said, and my voice had changed, and I heard it change, and I'm not going quietly by winter. Your son didn't make a mistake in that market, and neither did your wolf, and neither, I think, did mine. I stood. You've spent 2 years believing you don't deserve the bond because of what you couldn't give Astrid. But you didn't withhold it from her, Magnus. You never had it to give. It wasn't hers. It was always going to be someone else's. I made myself say the rest. It appears to be mine. And I am not going to let your guilt, or that woman's grief, cheat your son out of the mother his own wolf went out into a market and found. Lady Sigrun made her move the next morning, and she made it before the full council, which was her mistake, because a woman that clever should have known better than to build her trap in a room full of witnesses. She petitioned to take the child. She did it beautifully. The king was unwell with grief, she said. All the court could see it. He had let a nameless Omega into the royal nursery, a woman who had bewitched the prince's wolf, a stranger with no blood and no pack fastening herself to the air like a tick. For the good of the child, for the good of the bloodline, the boy should be given into the care of his mother's kin, to be raised properly among his own until such time as the king recovered himself. She had votes. I could see it in the chamber, old lords who had loved Astrid, who found a grieving grandmother and a suspicious market witch a far easier story than the one where the king's dead marriage had been a duty. It was nearly done. It was so nearly done, and that is the moment I began this story with. the council on its feet, the king silent, and a small hand gripping mine so hard the knuckles went white. Because they had brought Bram in to make it clean, to hand him gently to his grandmother in front of the council so the transfer would look like mercy. And Bram had crossed the whole chamber, past his grandmother's open arms, past the lords, and put his hand in mine, and turned to face the room that wanted to take him, and set his small jaw in an expression I recognised, because I had worn it my whole life. It was the face of someone with nothing, who has decided, anyway, not to let go. I did not let go either. "He is 3 years old," I said into the chamber, and I did not raise my voice, because a thing said quietly in a loud room is the only thing anyone remembers. And every one of you has staked your vote on the idea that a pup's wolf is never wrong. You teach it to your own children. You have believed it your whole lives. It is the first law of this pack. I looked at Lady Sigrun. "So which is it, my lady? Is a pup's wolf never wrong, or is it never wrong until it names a bread seller, and then, suddenly, for the first time in the history of your people, it is a sickness to be cured by taking the child away from the one person he chose?" The chamber had gone very still. You cannot have both. Either your grandson is broken, and everything you have ever taught about wolves is a lie, or he is right, and you are trying to take a child away from his mother in front of a council that knows better. The room's certainty turned, all at once the way weather turns. And Lady Sigrun, who could not afford to be cornered, stopped being clever. "He is bewitched," she said too loud, "and I will not lose my daughter's son to her," and she reached out and seized Bram's arm to pull him bodily from my hand. And the boy cried out, and his small wolf flared in terror, and in the chaos of it a brazier went over, knocked by a lord surging to his feet, and a sheet of flame ran up the old dry tapestry beside the child, and for one heartbeat the whole thing hung in the balance. A screaming pup, a spreading fire, a room of people too shocked to move. I moved. I have no wolf worth the name, and no strength worth boasting, but I had 2 hands and a child, and the 2 occupy the whole of a person if you let them. I put myself between Bram and the fire, and I swept him up, and I took the burning edge of that tapestry across my forearm, getting him clear of it. I felt it. The real and immediate cost of it. The skin of my arm searing as I turned my body into a wall between a 3-year-old and the flames. The pain was enormous. I did not let go of him. A person can hold on to a great deal, it turns out, if the alternative is letting a child burn. And then Magnus was there. The king crossed that chamber faster than I have ever seen anything move, and he tore the burning tapestry down with his bare hands, and he put the fire out, and he turned, and he saw his son safe in the arms of a bread seller whose forearm was blistering red, and something in the strongest wolf alive finally broke all the way open. He went to his knees in front of the whole council, not in fury, down on the stone, and took my burned arm in his 2 enormous hands as gently as if it were made of glass. And he did not look at Lady Sigrun, and he did not look at his lords, and he looked only at me and at his son. "Enough," he said, and his voice filled the chamber to the rafters. "I have let this pack tell a kind lie for 2 years, because it was easier than the truth, and my son nearly burned for it in front of me." He rose, still holding my arm. "Hear the truth then, all of you, and let the grieving be honest at last. I loved Astrid as a friend and a partner and the mother of my child, and never once as a mate, because the bond was never hers. She knew it, she forgave it, and she deserved a better man than the one who could not give her what was not his to give." His eyes went, for the first time in 2 years, up to the golden portrait above the high table, and held there, and I watched a man begin, at long last, to actually grieve. I dishonoured her memory more by pretending than I ever could by telling the truth. And the truth is that my son's wolf did what my own was too broken to do. It went out into a market, and it found the woman the bond was always waiting for. He looked at me. "You have been kind to my child for 11 days without asking anything, and you put your own body between him and fire without a heartbeat's pause. My wolf knew you on the third night. My son knew you in the first hour. I am the last one to the truth, as I have been the last one to everything since the day I was crowned. His thumb moved over my unburned wrist. Stay, not as his nurse, not as my guest. Stay as what my son already named you. I stood in the wreckage of the council chamber with a prince on my hip and a burned arm and the king of the Iron Territories kneeling to a bread seller, and I did the only thing I have ever known how to do, which is tell the truth. I told you the first day that I was no one, I said, and the whole chamber leaned in to hear the Omega answer the king. I've decided to stop apologizing for it. I don't have a pack, or a name that opens doors, or a drop of noble blood. All I have is 2 hands and a stubborn habit of not letting go of things that need holding. Bram's fingers tightened in mine, and I let Magnus see me smile. Your son grabbed one of those hands in a market and called it home. I'm not going to make a liar of a 3-year-old. That's not a Luna's decision. It's just mine, and it's already made. He kissed me then. 1 breath. No more. A kiss that said a whole sentence and did not need to become a scene. And what broke open in me was not the thing the songs promise. It was recognition. Plain and total. The vertigo of being seen all the way down by a man who had spent 2 years believing he had no right to see anyone. And who chose, in front of the pack that wanted me gone, to want exactly what his son had found. Bram, wedged between us, patted us both on the face with enormous satisfaction, as though he had personally arranged the entire thing, which, I have since concluded, he had. Lady Sigrun was escorted from the chamber, and, in time, from the territory, she keeps to her own house now, and Bram visits twice a year. Because a boy should know his mother's blood even when his mother's blood behaved badly, and because I would not let old grief become one more thing taken from him. The king's wolf never once objected to my saying so, which I have learned to take as the final word on any matter in this house. They named me Luna, under the next full moon, which still strikes me as a thing that happened to someone else and got recorded under my name. My arm healed to a long pale scar I will carry for good, the cost of the thing, written where I can see it, and I have never once been sorry for it. Magnus touches it sometimes without knowing he does, the way you touch a thing that frightened you. I never mention it. Some things you give a person by not watching them. 6 months on, the golden portrait still hangs above the high table, and the king looks at it now, every day, on purpose, with a clear and honest sorrow that has nothing left to hide in it. We tell Bram about Astrid, the clever, kind woman who ran a kingdom and loved him for the 9 months she carried him. And we do not pretend she was something she was not, and the boy has 2 mothers now, one in the ground and one at the table, and does not seem to find this strange in the least. Children rarely do. They know things about love the rest of us take 2 years and a fire to work out. A letter came last week from the guild that would not let a packless Omega bake for its market stalls, without a sponsor I could never afford. They had heard, they wrote, that a bread seller from the lower town had married the Alpha King, and surely this was an error, and would I confirm it for their records? I had Edric write the reply. Since my hand for letters is poor from a life spent needing instead of writing. I did not gloat. Gloating and grace wear the same coat, in my experience, and it is hard to tell them apart from a distance, easier up close, where you can see which one is smiling. I confirmed the rumour. I added that I would be pleased to bake for their market again, any time they liked, and that they might reflect, in the meanwhile, on how many futures they had refused at the door because the future arrived with flour on its hands. Magnus found me dictating it at his own table, in the seat at his right hand, with Bram asleep against my side, and his small fist, even in sleep, wound through 2 of my fingers. "What are you telling them?" the king asked, reading over my shoulder. His wolf a warm weight across all 3 of our feet. "The truth," I said. That a pup looked up at a woman he had never met, grabbed her hand, and said 1 word, and the whole market went silent. I looked down at the sleeping child holding on to me even in his dreams. They all thought he'd made a mistake. He was the only one in the whole kingdom who hadn't. So before I let you go, tell me what you think, because I have turned it over for half a year and I still cannot settle it. Do you believe a pup's wolf truly knows the future, that Bram looked at a stranger and saw, with a certainty none of us could match, the mother he was meant to have? Or do you think it was only a grieving child reaching for the first warm hand that reached back? And it happened, by grace, to reach for the one woman his father's bond had been waiting on all along? Tell me your theory below. I have lived inside the answer for 6 months, and I still cannot decide. And if you want to stay with us, Bram Growing, the portrait honestly grieved at last. Whatever small hand reaches for mine next, comment the wolf and follow along, because I have made a life out of not letting go of the things that grab hold of me, and this fortress, it turns out, is full of them. Where are you listening from tonight? Pull up a chair. The bread is fresh, the fire is warm, and there is a small boy who will insist, the moment he wakes, on holding your hand too. The sand in the challenge circle was already dark with blood, and the king was on one knee, and the whole court had gone silent, and this time the silence was not for me. I stood at the edge of a ring I had no rank to enter, watching the strongest wolf alive kneel in his own fighting circle, with a wound in his side that should not have been there, and the war marshal standing over him with a blade that gleamed wrong, and every lord in that hall frozen because they had all decided, days ago, how this was going to end. And I understood, with a cold clarity that had nothing meek left in it, that I was the only person in the room who had seen what put the king on his knee. And that if I kept my head down and my mouth shut the way a lower Maga is supposed to, he was going to die of it. So I did the thing I had spent my whole life not doing, and the thing that had started all of this in the first place. I opened my mouth. And I growled. But that is the end of it, near enough, and a woman who tells you the end before she has earned it deserves to be turned off. Let me go back to the grievance hearing I had no business speaking at, and a growl I did not decide to make. I have spent my whole life being small. I want to say that plainly, because it is the thing you have to understand about me before any of the rest makes sense. I am an Omega, and I was born at the very bottom of the pack, below the warriors, below the general run of wolves, below very nearly everyone, and a wolf-born that low learns one lesson before all the others: keep your wolf small. Do not bristle. Do not meet an eye you are not invited to meet. A lower Mega who lets her wolf show its teeth, even once, even by accident, does not usually get to be a lower Mega for very long. I learnt it young. I was very, very good at it. 26 years old, and I had never once in my life let anyone see the animal in me stand up. Which is why what happened at the hearing was so completely, catastrophically out of character that I still, to this day, do not entirely understand how my own throat betrayed me. The grievance hearings were a public thing. The Alpha King sat in judgment over disputes too small for a council and too large for a village to settle, and the low pack came to be heard, or more often to watch someone else be heard and be grateful it was not them. I had come for a neighbour of mine, an old half-deaf still-room woman who had been cheated of her winter grain by a ranked warrior who knew she could not read a tally and could not challenge him. It was a small, ugly theft of the kind that happens to people at the bottom all the time, and I had come to stand with her, because no one else would, and because I have never been able to watch someone be made hungry when I could do something about it. That is not a virtue. It is closer to a wound. I had not meant to speak. Lower Magas do not speak at hearings. But the warrior lied, smoothly, and the king, Thorn of the Iron Territories, cold and enormous on his wolf-carved throne. A man whose reputation was his armour, and whose armour had clearly never once been dented, seemed inclined to believe him, because a king has better things to do than weigh the word of a deaf old woman against a ranked man. And he made a remark, a dismissive, closing sort of remark, the kind a powerful man makes when he has decided a small matter beneath him, Something about the difficulty of settling disputes where one party could not even keep her own accounts. And something in me, some animal thing I had spent 26 years sitting on, stood all the way up before my mind could stop it. I growled at the Alpha King. Not a whimper, not a low frightened sound, a growl, a real one. Up from the chest, teeth in it. The sound a wolf makes at another wolf who has just done something its own honour cannot let stand. It came out of me in the middle of the king's own hall, aimed at the king's own throat, and the instant it was out I would have given every year of my life to call it back. The whole court went silent. I have been in quiet rooms. I had never been in a silence like that one, the silence of 100 wolves who have just watched the lowest creature in the room bare her teeth at the highest, and are waiting, in a kind of collective held breath, to see the lowest creature die for it. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the stone floor to open. I dropped my eyes, and my whole body went cold, and I braced for whatever comes to an Omega who forgets, for one fatal second, who she is talking to. The king of the Iron Territories looked at me, and he laughed. I did not understand it. No one understood it. It was not a cruel laugh, not the laugh of a man about to enjoy a punishment. It was startled out of him, sudden and real and astonished. A great warm sound that cracked across that frozen hall like a log breaking open, and it was, I would learn, the first time in living memory that anyone had heard the Alpha King laugh at all. Wolves who had served him for years turned to stare at him as though a statue had spoken. His second, a broad, wary man named Callum, actually took a step forward as if to catch something falling, and in the ringing aftermath of it, the king's wolf came out from behind the throne, the great dark beast of him, and it did not stalk toward the insolent Omega to put her down. It came down the length of the hall to where I stood shaking, and it lowered its huge head to my level, and it growled back at me. Softly, an answer, a wolf replying to a wolf, the way an equal answers an equal. And its tail was moving, and I understood even through my terror that the beast was not angry. The beast was delighted. Well, the king said, into a silence that had not the faintest idea what to do with itself. He was still almost smiling. I watched him try to put it away and fail. The old woman keeps her grain, and the warrior repays what he skimmed, with a fine on top for lying to my face. His winter grey eyes came back to me, and there was something in them I could not read and did not trust. And the Omega who just growled at her king will attend this court tomorrow and the day after, so that I may determine what exactly is to be done with her. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my cold little room and composed my own eulogy and decided it would be a short one. If you want to know what a king's laugh actually meant that day, and whether a low Omega who bared her teeth at the throne lived long enough to find out, because there were those in that court who meant to see that she did not, then stay with me. Follow this one to the end. The whole pack had a story about what happened at that hearing. Even I had a story about it. And the story we all told was wrong in one specific place, and that place is where the whole thing turns. I attended court the next day, certain it was the last thing I would ever do. He did not punish me. He asked my opinion. That was worse. Do you understand how much worse that was? A grievance came before him, a boundary dispute between two ranked houses, tedious and mean, and in the middle of it the Alpha King turned to the lowest ranked person in his hall, the Omega he was supposedly deciding the fate of, and asked me, in front of everyone, what I thought. And I, having decided I was already dead and therefore having nothing left to lose, told him, bluntly, that both houses were lying and he was letting them, and that the actual injured party was the tenant farmer neither house had bothered to summon. The court made a sound like a room full of people swallowing at once. The king leaned back on his wolf throne and looked at me for a long moment, and then he summoned the tenant farmer. And the tenant farmer told the truth, and the king ruled the way I had said he should, and I stood there having just won an argument with the Alpha King in his own hall and felt the entire court revising, very rapidly, its estimate of how the world worked. It became a pattern, and the pattern was unbearable. He kept me at court. He kept asking, and this is the part I am not proud of, the part that felt less like courage than like a cliff I could not stop walking off. I kept answering. Every time he left me an opening, I fell into it. Every time he said something I could not let stand. My wretched, honest wolf stood back up, and I said the true thing, out loud, to the most powerful man alive, in front of a court that watched each time with the appalled fascination of people watching someone juggle knives, and each time, some piece of the king's armour came off in public. He lost arguments to me. He conceded points. Once, when I caught him in a genuine error of law and said so, he inclined his head, the Alpha King, inclining his head to a low Omega, and the Master of Arms had to leave the hall. And every single time, his wolf was delighted. It answered my growls. It took to lying near me at council, at my level, on the floor, a beast that outranked every warrior in the room, choosing to keep company with the pack's lowest wolf as though we were den mates. It would bring me things, not stolen finery, nothing so simple. It brought me its own worried bones and half-gnawed things, the way a wolf shares with a packmate it has decided to feed, which is a far more intimate and scandalous thing, and the court did not know where to look. I laughed about it once, alone, and then stopped, because I did not understand it, and things I do not understand have always been the ones that got people like me killed. Lord Dane understood it, or thought he did, and Lord Dane was the one who meant to see me dead. He was the war marshal, the king's own champion, the wolf who commanded the warriors, and the true engine, I came to see, of the throne's power. Because Thorn ruled by being feared, and Dane was the one who had spent years making sure he was, who kept the machinery of that fear oiled and running, who had grown so accustomed to a king whose menace he could point wherever he liked, that he had come to think of the throne's dread as his own possession. And a king who laughed, a king who lost arguments to an Omega and let his wolf lie on the floor with the lowest of the pack, was a king whose fear was leaking out of Dane's hands like water. So he made his first move, and he made it in open court, dressed as loyalty. "My king," he said, one grey afternoon, in a voice pitched to carry to the farthest wall, "I must speak, though it grieves me. The whole territory has heard how the Omega growled at you. Under the old law, a wolf who offers challenge to her alpha, and a growl is a challenge, the law is clear. Answers for it with exile or her life. You have let it pass. You have, forgive me, rewarded it. The low pack watches. The rival territories watch. They do not see a merciful king. They see a king whose authority a bottom-rank Omega may bite at without consequence." He spread his hands, reasonable, ruinous, "For the strength of your own throne, enforce the law. Let her be made an example, or every wolf who ever chafed under your rule will remember that the king let himself be growled at, and did nothing. It was cleverly done. He had made my mercy into the king's weakness. He had built it so that to spare me was to prove Dane's point, and to look strong the king would have to destroy me. I stood in that hall and felt the trap close, and I saw, in the faces of the old warrior lords, that a great many of them agreed with Dane, that they too were frightened of a king who laughed, that they too wanted the Omega dealt with, so the world could go back to being a place they understood. The king did not have me killed. But I saw, for the first time, that it cost him something not to, that Dane had put him in a corner where every choice bled him. And I could not understand why a proud king would pay that price, in public, for a low Omega he had known a fortnight. It made no sense. Unless the story I had been telling myself about the hearing was wrong somewhere. It was. I found out where that night. I had gone to return the wolf's latest offering. I could not keep letting the beast bring me its bones. The court was scandalized enough. And I found the king alone in the mews above the fighting yard, watching his warriors drill by torchlight, and I did the thing I had apparently become unable to stop doing. I asked him the true question, bluntly, to his face. "Why won't you just be rid of me?" I said. "Dane's right about one thing, I'm costing you. Every argument you lose to me, every time your wolf lies down with the bottom of your own pack, you bleed a little standing you can't spare, and he's counting every drop. So end it. Punish me, banish me, I don't care which. Stop paying for a lower mega you met 2 weeks ago. It doesn't make sense, and things that don't make sense get people like me killed." The king was quiet for a long moment, watching the torchlight. When he answered, his voice had lost the armor entirely. "Do you want to know a thing no one in this kingdom knows?" he said. The growl at the hearing. He turned to look at me. It was not an accident. Not entirely. And it was not my wolf. He said the next part slowly, like a man setting down something he had carried a long way. "I had been watching you for weeks before that hearing. The Omega who stood with the deaf woman when no one else would. The one who watched every ruling I made with her jaw, set like she was biting back 100 things she was too low to say. I recognized you before my wolf did. That is the part not even Dane has guessed. And I wanted, more than I have wanted anything in 10 years of being feared, to know what you would say if you ever let it out. So at the hearing I made that remark, the cruel one, about the accounts. I said it to you. And I said it because I knew, I hoped. It was the one thing your honor would not be able to swallow." His jaw worked. "I provoked you into growling at me in open court. And when you did, I laughed. Because I could not help it, because someone had finally answered me as a wolf and not a weapon. And then I told the whole court my wolf was delighted, and let them believe the beast had run ahead of the man, because a king like me is permitted to have a headstrong wolf." He looked away. He is not permitted to admit that the man, underneath, was starving. 3 sentences past any cap a story is built to hold, and I let him have every one, because a man does not say a thing like that in 3 sentences, and I have never been made of rules. And the whole shape of it turned over in my chest at once. The story the entire court told, the story I had told, was that the king's wolf was delighted, the beast ahead of the man, the way it always is. And it was a lie he had hidden inside on purpose. It was never the wolf. It was him. The proud, feared, untouchable king had reached down into the bottom of his own pack and deliberately picked a fight with a low Omega, because in a whole kingdom of wolves who cowered when he entered a room, he had not once, in 10 years, been treated as though he was simply a person you could be angry at. That was the moment the fear went out of me, and something with a spine took its place. "You've spent 10 years making everyone in this kingdom too frightened to talk back to you," I said, and my voice had changed. And I heard it change. And it turns out that's the loneliest thing I've ever heard, and I've been lonely in ways you can't imagine. So I'm going to stop apologizing for the growl. I took a step toward the Alpha King, which no low Omega does, and I did not drop my eyes. "You wanted someone who'd answer you like an equal. Fine, here I am. I'm going to keep answering you, out loud, in front of your court, in front of Dane, on purpose now, not by accident. And you're going to stop hiding behind your wolf and admit it's you who wants it. Because your armor isn't your throne, Thorn, it's your cage. And I have spent my whole life small enough to know a cage when I'm looking at one." He looked at me like a man who had been handed something he did not believe he was allowed to hold. Dane made his real move a week later, when he saw the king stop hiding, when the whole court watched Thorn concede an argument to me, and, for once, not blame it on his wolf. That was the moment Dane understood he had lost the war of whispers. So he stopped whispering and reached for the one thing that had always settled matters in the Iron Territories, the oldest law of all. He challenged the king for the throne. He did it in open court, in ancient form, and he wrapped it in righteousness. The king had gone soft, bewitched by a low Omega, unfit to hold the pack against its enemies, and Dane, loyal Dane, strong Dane, would prove the stronger wolf in the circle, as the law allowed, and take the burden the king could no longer carry. Blood law. A dominance challenge. There was no refusing it without conceding the throne, and Thorn, who had spent 10 years being feared instead of tested, who had let Dane be his teeth for so long that his own had gone unused, had to meet the strongest, cruelest fighter in his kingdom in the circle, alone, and that is the moment I began this story with. The sand already dark. The king on one knee, because Dane fought dirty, and Dane fought to kill, and halfway through the challenge I saw the thing no one else was positioned to see. When they came together and broke apart, there was a gleam along the edge of Dane's blade that did not belong there, a wet, oily sheen, wrong in the torchlight, and I had spent enough years in still rooms fetching for healers to know an envenomed edge when I saw one. Dane had poisoned his blade. Against every law of the challenge, he had come to make sure that even a scratch would fell the king, and he had already opened a long line in Thorn's side, and I could see the poison beginning its work in the way the king's knee had buckled, in the grey creeping into a face that should have been flushed with the fight. The court did not see it. The court saw only the king failing, and half of them had already decided that meant the king was meant to fail. I was a lower meagre at the edge of a circle I had no rank to enter, and I had two choices, and they were the same two choices I have had my whole life: be small and safe and silent, or open my mouth and pay for it. I opened my mouth. And I growled. It tore across that hall the way it had torn across the hearing, up from the chest, teeth in it, and in the shock of it. The lowest wolf in the pack baring her teeth in the middle of a king's challenge, the whole court froze and turned, and into that frozen half-second I had bought, I shouted the truth. His blade is fouled. Look at it. Look at the edge. He's poisoned it. There's no scratch that isn't a death wound with venom on the steel, and the law of the circle is blood, not poison. The marshal is cheating to kill his king. The hall erupted. The old warrior lords, who lived and died by the law of the circle, surged to see, and there it was, plain on the blade for anyone with eyes, the oily wrongness of it, and Dane, exposed, did the thing cornered men do. He abandoned the pretense and lunged to finish Thorn before the truth could matter. Poisoned steel driving down at a kneeling king. I was already moving, I have no rank and no strength worth boasting, but I had crossed into that circle before I decided to, and I put myself into the space where the blade was going, and I got a hand on Dane's arm, not to stop it, I could never have stopped it, only to spoil it. And the poisoned edge that was meant for the king's throat opened a long line across my shoulder instead. The pain was enormous. But it brought a heartbeat, and a heartbeat was all Thorn needed. Because his wolf answered my growl. I heard it, felt it, the great dark beast of him surging up through the poison and the pain at the sound of its packmate in the circle. And the king came off his knee with the last of his strength and the first honest fury I had ever seen in him, and he took the marshal down clean, with his hands, the way the law demanded, the way he should have been allowed to from the start. Dane went into the bloody sand and did not get up, and the healers had the poison off both of us before it finished its work, though it was a near thing. Nearer for the king than for me, and I carry the mark of that blade on my shoulder still. Lord Dane lived to be judged, which was worse for him than the circle would have been. Stripped of his marshal's rank, his cheat witnessed by the whole court that had nearly crowned him, exiled under a writ that named him Oathbreaker in the oldest terms the pack has. The warriors who had wavered toward him watched a lower mega catch the treachery they had all missed, and the Iron Territories has not, since that day, mistaken fear for strength quite so easily. The king rose in his own circle, bleeding, grey with poison, and he did not go to his healers. He came to me, where they were binding my shoulder, and he did the thing his whole proud life had trained him never to do. He knelt. In front of the entire court, in the bloody sand, the Alpha King knelt to the lowest wolf in his pack. For 10 years, he said, and his voice filled the hall to the rafters, I let a man make me into a weapon. Because a weapon is feared, and I mistook being feared for being strong. And a lower meager growled at me in my own hall, and I felt, for the first time in a decade, like a wolf and not a blade, and I hid what that meant behind my own beast, because I was too proud to say it out loud. He looked up at me, grey and bleeding and unarmoured at last. It was never my wolf that was delighted, Fen. It was me. I provoked that growl. I have wanted, from the first, to be answered by you and not obeyed. My wolf only ever agreed with the man for once. His hand found my unhurt one. You told me my armour was a cage. You were right. You have just watched it nearly get me killed. Stay, not as my subject, not as a lower mega I am raising up, but as the one wolf in this kingdom who will look me in the eye and tell me when I am wrong, out loud, in front of everyone, for the rest of my life. I stood in the challenge circle with a bound shoulder and a kneeling king and the whole court watching, and I did the thing I have apparently become unable to stop doing, which is tell the truth. I've spent 26 years keeping my wolf small so no one would kill me for it, I said, and the whole hall leaned in to hear the Omega answer the king. And the first time I let her stand up, it was at you, by accident, and you laughed instead of killing me. I let him see me smile, though my shoulder was on fire. I'm not going to make her small again. Not for you, not for your court, not for anyone. You want a wolf who'll growl at you when you deserve it? I'm the cheapest one you'll ever find. I've been doing it for free since the day we met. I closed my hand around his. That's not a Luna's decision. It's just mine and my wolf's, and for once we're in complete agreement. He laughed then, that same startled, warm, unguarded sound, in front of the whole court, and this time no one was afraid of it, and he kissed me, one breath, no more. A kiss that said a whole sentence and did not need to become a scene. And what broke open in me was not the thing the songs promise. It was recognition, plain and total, the vertigo of being answered, all the way down. By a man who had spent 10 years being obeyed and never once met, and who chose, in front of the pack that wanted me silenced, to want a wolf who would never ever stay small for him. His wolf shoved its great head between us and growled, softly, delighted, and I growled back, and the beast's tail went, and the two of us finished the argument the only way our kind knows how. And the court, I am told, simply gave up trying to understand it. A year on, I am the Luna of the Iron Territories, which still strikes me as a clerical error committed by a very confused pack. My shoulder healed to a long pale scar I will carry for good, the cost of the thing, written where I can see it, and I have never once been sorry for it. Thorn touches it sometimes without meaning to, the way you touch a thing that frightened you. I never mention it. Some things you give a person by not watching them. The hall is different now. I did not expect that to be the thing that changed most. But it was. A court that once flinched at the king's silence now lives in the sound of his laughing. Because it turns out, a king who is allowed to be answered is a king who is allowed to be a person, and a person laughs. The low pack does not cower the way it did. The deaf stillroom woman keeps her grain, and 3 other women like her have learned that the Luna will hear a grievance the ranked lords would wave away, and I hear every one of them. Because I have not forgotten for a single day what it is to be too low to be listened to. A letter came last week from the warrior who cheated the deaf woman at that very first hearing, the one whose lie started all of this, writing now, very carefully, to congratulate the new Luna and to hope that old misunderstandings might be set aside. I had Callum write the reply, since my hand for letters is poor from a life spent fetching and mending. I did not gloat. Gloating and grace wear the same coat, in my experience, and it is hard to tell them apart from a distance, easier up close, where you can see which one is smiling. I informed him that the Luna set aside nothing, forgot nothing, and would be watching his tallies personally, and that he might reflect, in the meanwhile, on the fact that his small, ugly theft of an old woman's grain was the thing that put a growl in my throat in the first place, and look where that ended. Thorn found me dictating it at his own table, in the seat at his right hand. His wolf a warm weight across both our feet, growling softly in its sleep at some dream I would have given a great deal to hear. "What are you telling him?" the king asked, reading over my shoulder. "The truth," I said, that she didn't mean to do it, that her instincts just forgot, for 1 second, who they were talking to. I set down the pen, and that it turned out to be the best mistake either of us ever made. Because you'd been waiting 10 years for someone too low to know she was supposed to stay quiet, and I'd been waiting my whole life for someone who'd laugh instead of putting me down for it. So before I let you go, tell me what you think, because I have turned it over for a year and I still cannot settle it. Do you believe him, that it was truly the man and not the wolf, that a proud king reached all the way down to the bottom of his own pack and picked a fight with me on purpose, because he was that starved to be answered? Or do you think he only tells it that way now to make a grand story of a thing his beast started, and it really was the wolf all along, running ahead of him the way they always do? Tell me your theory below. I have lived inside the answer for a year, and I still cannot decide which of them is lying to me, the man or the wolf. And if you want to stay in this hall, the grievances I hear, the laughter that used to be a silence, whatever fight my honest mouth picks next, comment the wolf and follow along, because I have made a whole new life out of not keeping my wolf small. And I promise you it is not finished having things to say. Where are you listening from tonight? Come sit at the low tables where I still take my grievances. There is room, and someone will listen, and if a king says something he shouldn't, you are welcome to growl.